May 12th, 1962. 0814 hours, Edwards Air Force Base, California. The desert floor vibrates with a heat haze as Captain Louis "Red" Halverson, USAF test pilot, tightens the straps across his flight suit. Grit stings his cheeks, the wind tastes of dust and jet fuel. Ahead of him sits the aircraft nobody in the hangars can agree on, half bomber, half attack craft, all possibility. An early Douglas light strike prototype, the ancestor of what would one day become the A-12 Avenger II concept. It gleams in the morning sun, its stubby delta wings casting a jagged shadow across the cracked tarmac. Its edges are sharp, almost too sharp, as if drawn by an engineer who didn't believe in curves. Unlike the slow and rugged A-1 Sky Raider or the bulky B-57 Canberra, this machine is small, fast, and built to dive into jungles no one in Washington yet imagines Americans will soon fight in. Halverson climbs the ladder, boots clanking. Crew Chief Master Sergeant Ray Donnelly hands him a clipboard. "Final checks complete, Captain, but she's twitchy today. Elevator response looks off." Halverson smirks. "She's always twitchy. That's why they gave her to me." But Donnelly doesn't smile back. Behind him, two Douglas engineers, Walter Keene and Dr. Harold Nishida, exchange a look that isn't confidence. For months, the team has argued over the aircraft's thin composite skin, the new stress distribution ribs, and the experimental bomb bay door sequencing that was supposed to allow precision drops at high speed. On paper, it worked. In the sky? No one knows yet. Inside the cockpit, Halverson settles in. The seat creaks, the oxygen hose clicks into place. Switches rise like silver teeth across the instrument panel. He taps the fuel pressure gauge. Normal. Hydraulic lines hum beneath his boots. Ahead, the runway shimmers. An open road into the unknown. Control tower crackles in his headset. "Avenger prototype, you are cleared for takeoff. Wind 5 knots from the west. Godspeed, Red." Engines spool up, not a roar, but a tight, high-pitched snarl, the sound of a machine built for speed it has never yet achieved. Dust lifts in spirals. The aircraft shudders. Halverson throttles forward. The jet rolls. Faster, faster. Then, the wheels break ground. The desert drops away. Altitude climbs 2,000 feet, 4,000, 7,500. The prototype slices through the morning air, its thin wings trembling as sunlight flashes across the canopy. Halverson feels every vibration through the frame, a language only test pilots speak. "She's light," he mutters. "Feels like she wants to run." But at 11,000 feet, something changes. A soft jolt, then another. The nose dips a fraction. Halverson steadies it. Behind him, turbulence spirals along the trailing edges. Too much for the aircraft's structure. The experimental internal weapons cradle, meant to stabilize small payloads for jungle strike missions, rattles inside the fuselage. A warning light flickers. HYD press. B. Halverson exhales slowly. Not now. Not today. He banks east, toward open sky. Testing hasn't even begun. No weapons cycle, no dive profile, no low-speed handling trials. Yet the machine already feels as though it's being asked to carry secrets it isn't strong enough to hold. Below, Donnelly and the engineers stand beside the runway, shielding their eyes as the jet arcs overhead. Dr. Nishida mutters, half to himself, "If this works, it'll change how we fight the wars we're not even in yet." But Washington is already losing patience, budgets tightening, priorities shifting, and rumors, barely whispers, say that the Pentagon is eyeing helicopters and turboprop gunships instead of sleek experimental bombers. In the cockpit, Halverson feels the nose dip again, harder this time. The sky tilts. A second warning light dances to life, then a third. Something inside the prototype groans, a metallic, bending protest that no aircraft should ever make in flight. Halverson's pulse jumps. He grips the stick. "Not on my watch," he growls. But beneath him, the bomber that might have changed the first years of the Vietnam War is beginning to unravel. And there is no turning back. 11,200 feet. Eastern Test Corridor. The desert shrinks beneath the canopy as Captain Halverson fights the creeping sag in the nose. The prototype shivers, an unnatural, metallic tremor that travels through the frame like a warning whispered too late. The gauges flare again. One needle spasms into the red, then drops back as if uncertain whether to panic. Halverson steadies his breathing. Edwards Tower, this is Test 6. I'm getting oscillations on all control surfaces. Request vector to return. A long pause. Then the tower replies, tension buried under professionalism. Test 6, copy. Turn heading 180 and descend to 9,000. Advise status. He banks left. The aircraft obeys, barely. The ailerons feel mushy like pushing against wet sand. Every small correction comes with a half-second delay. Not normal. Not survivable if this were combat. Below, far behind him, the runway team watches through binoculars. Crew Chief Donnelly growls, "That's not turbulence. Something's moving in that airframe." Beside him, Engineer Walter Keene winces. He knows exactly what might be happening. The controversial flex-load transfer ribs, thin components meant to lighten the bomber's structure, might be failing under real air pressure. Another jolt hits the aircraft, this one harder. A thunk echoes through the fuselage, the sound of something shifting where nothing in an aircraft should ever shift. Halverson's jaw tightens. "Come on, girl. Stay with me." The vibration intensifies. The stick begins to quiver. Every fighter instinct he has screams that something catastrophic is brewing. He glances to his right. The wingtip shivers violently, a ripple running from root to tip like a wave racing along metal skin. Then, bang! The entire aircraft lurches downward. An amber light flashes. WPN cradle unlocked. Halverson's stomach drops. The internal weapons cradle, still empty, but crucial to the bomber's structural integrity, has partially broken free. The prototype was built around that cradle. If it shifts, the entire frame loses rigidity. "Tower, this is Test 6. Structural fault. Repeat, structural." A grinding metallic scream cuts him off. The bomber shakes violently, panels rattling as the airframe twists a fraction left, then right, as if trying to tear itself apart. Halverson's training takes over. He kills speed, levels the wings, keeps the nose up. Every second counts now. "Come on, come on." But the aircraft will not climb. At 8,900 feet, it continues sinking. The engineers on the ground see the descending arc. Dr. Nishida whispers, "It's failing. The cradle mounts, God, they're failing." Keene snaps the binoculars down. "He can't land that. He needs to eject." But Halverson refuses. Not yet. Not until he knows he can't save it. He toggles the emergency stabilizers. Hydraulic fluid surges through backup lines. He feels the pedals stiffen, then lock for a moment, then respond again. Altitude, 7,400 feet. A soft chime sounds. Not warning. Not danger. Worse, the master caution resets. The aircraft is losing electrical stability. Halverson glances at the horizon. The desert is a haze of tan and gold. The sky, cloudless, a perfect California morning, and yet inside the cockpit, chaos swirls like a storm. The left wing dips, he counters. The wing dips again, he counters harder. The prototype's thin frame simply cannot bear the forces it was designed to survive. For a heartbeat, Halverson imagines this aircraft in Vietnam, the jungles, the humidity, the turbulence of low-altitude runs over tree canopies. If the cradle fails here, in perfect test conditions, it never would have lasted a week in Southeast Asia. The nose drops sharply. A klaxon screams. The structural groan becomes a roar. Halverson whispers one word that only test pilots ever say to doomed aircraft. "Sorry." His hand hovers over the yellow and black ejection handle. The bomber shudders violently. Altitude, 6,200 feet. Donnelly yells from the runway, "Pull it, Red. Pull the damn handle." The aircraft tilts into a shallow, uncontrolled descent. The prototype, the future that never reached Vietnam, is dying beneath him. 6,000 feet. The prototype is no longer flying. It is enduring, shuddering in the sky like a wounded animal trying to stay upright. Panels vibrate so hard that Halverson hears screws rattling in their seats. The altimeter spins in small, sickening drops. "Test 6, the tower calls, voice cracking despite protocol. "You are losing altitude rapidly. Confirm you are preparing to eject." Halverson closes his eyes for 1 second. Just one. In that second, he hears every conversation from the last 6 months. Budget cuts. Arguments over structural composition. The whispers from the Pentagon that unconventional warfare in Southeast Asia will require slower, more rugged aircraft. not fast little bombers like this. Then the aircraft yaws violently left. The right wing rises sharply. A hollow pop detonates under the floor as another mounting point shears. That decides everything. Halverson grips the ejection handle. "Edwards, test 6. I'm punching out." He pulls. The cockpit explodes upward. Wind slams into him at over 300 knots. The desert becomes a spinning mural of white and gold. His seat rockets free, tumbling end over end before stabilizing. He feels the harness yank hard across his ribs as the parachute deploys. Floating now. Silence, broken only by the fading scream of the doomed aircraft below. The prototype dips, rolls, straightens for a moment, and then begins a slow spiraling fall toward the desert floor. A trail of shimmering metal flakes streams behind it, part skin, part structure, all failure. On the ground, Donnelly slams his fist into the side of a jeep. "Damn it, we told them the cradle couldn't take high-speed vibration." Keen exhales through his teeth. "Cost-saving innovation," they said. Dr. Nishida watches Halverson drift under his parachute. At least he made it out. Then, impact. A plume of dust rises where the bomber strikes the earth, its experimental frame collapsing inward in a final metallic gasp. No explosion. The aircraft carried no fuel beyond test minimums, but the sound echoes across the desert like a verdict. Halverson hits the ground moments later. His chute collapses behind him. He kneels, palms resting on the sand, heartbeat thundering in his ears. The heat radiates through his gloves. He looks toward the crash site. Steam rising, debris scattered like broken bones. He knows instantly what this means. Not for him. For the aircraft, for the entire program. The jeep arrives in a spray of dust. Donnelly leaps out first. "You alive, Captain?" Halverson nods. "Yeah, but she's not." Keen climbs out slowly, carrying a clipboard as if it weighs 50 pounds. "We'll need your flight data, but we already know what happened." Nishida stands last, hands on hips, staring at the smoke plume. "When this gets back to Washington, they'll kill the project." Halverson wipes sand from his face. His voice is steady, but hollow. "They were already halfway there." Because deep inside the Pentagon, another set of meetings is taking place. Meetings where the words counterinsurgency, jungle warfare, and low-intensity conflict have begun to replace discussions of high-speed strike bombers. Helicopters are rising in priority. Turboprops, gunships, aircraft that can loiter, not just sprint. And today's crash will give the budget officers all the ammunition they need. Donnelly looks at the captain. "You did everything right. It's the plane that was wrong." Halverson doesn't answer. He knows the truth. The aircraft wasn't wrong. The moment was. America hadn't yet entered Vietnam in force. The military didn't yet understand what kind of air war it would need. To them, this bomber was ahead of its time, too far ahead. Behind them, a radio crackles with the inevitable. "All test flights suspended. Recovery teams en route. Stand by for program review." Halverson mutters under his breath. "That's it. She's done." The sun climbs higher. The smoke thins. But something far bigger than a test aircraft just fell into the desert sand. A vision of the war that was coming. One the United States wasn't prepared to see yet. 4 days later, May 16th, 1962. Pentagon, Room 2E801. A fluorescent hum fills the conference chamber as Colonel Richard Ames, Air Force Systems Command, flicks through a thin, grim folder labeled Light Strike Prototype, Incident Report. Across the table sit 2 Douglas executives, a civilian defense analyst, and a procurement officer from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Their faces are tight, tired, and wary. The crash is still fresh. Film reels from the recovery site showing twisted ribs, collapsed internal frames, and the sheared weapons cradle have already circulated among the upper brass. Ames clears his throat. "This wasn't a pilot failure. Captain Halverson executed by the book." A pause, then he slides a photo across the table. A heap of broken alloy in the desert. One wing snapped outright, the fuselage buckled open like a crushed soda can. The Douglas executive, Howard Trenton, swallows hard. "We can reinforce the cradle mounts, add internal stiffeners. It's fixable." The procurement officer raises an eyebrow. "Fixable, yes. Affordable? That's another story." The analyst steps in. Even if Douglas repairs the structural issues, we have other concerns. Mission profile is shifting. Southeast Asia, if the situation escalates, won't need a sprint bomber. It'll need endurance aircraft, gunships, something that can circle above the tree line, not dive through it at Mach speeds. Ames leans back. So we're abandoning precision strike? No, Colonel, the analyst replies. We're redefining it. The Douglas team exchanges a glance, one of helplessness. Their bomber was built for a war no one officially acknowledged yet, a war that would demand new tools, not the ones engineers thought the future would require. Trenton tries again. Sir, this aircraft could deploy ordnance faster, more accurately, and with less exposure than the A-1 Skyraider. The Air Force is always talking about modernization. This is modernization. But Ames shakes his head. Modernization without reliability is a liability. He pushes forward a second photograph, an internal shot from the wreckage. The weapons cradle, bent, dislodged, nearly torn free. This part failed under mild aerodynamic loading, Ames says. Imagine humidity, rough air, enemy fire, corrosion, and low-level turbulence in a place like... He stops himself before saying, Vietnam, though everyone in the room thinks it. Trenton's voice cracks. If you let us rebuild... The procurement officer cuts him off. We're not funding a redesign. The secretary wants close air support options yesterday, and your aircraft isn't ready today. A silent verdict settles over the room. The light strike bomber, sleek, ambitious, experimental, has no future. The analyst folds his notes. We're reallocating to rotary wing assets and AC-47 side-firing concepts. The jungle changes everything. Gentlemen, thank you for your work, but the program is being shelved. Not canceled, not terminated. Shelved. The word bureaucrats use to bury a project without the funeral. The meeting ends. The Douglas executives step into the hallway, defeated. One rubs his face with both hands. We were 5 years early, he mutters. No, the other corrects softly. We were 10 years early. Edwards Air Force Base. Same afternoon. Captain Halverson stands beside the wreckage tarp, wind lifting a corner of the canvas, revealing a jagged edge of twisted metal. Donnelly approaches, hands in pockets. They kill it? He asks. Halverson nods. Yeah. Donnelly kicks the sand. Figures. They'll regret it. Not yet, Halverson replies quietly. Not until the war starts looking like the one this thing was built for. He places a hand on the tarp, on the broken machine that might have rewritten early Vietnam air support. Faster precision, surgical strikes, high-speed insertion bombs. The ideas will live on somewhere, in future designs, but not here. Not now. Above them, a pair of A-1 Skyraiders rumble across the sky, slow, rugged, everything Washington currently trusts. Halverson watches them fade into the desert horizon. We built the future, he murmurs. But the present wasn't ready. The wind carries the words away. The light strike bomber, the aircraft that should have shaped the opening years of the Vietnam War, will never leave the test ranges. Its story ends in the sand, its influence forgotten before it ever mattered. June 1962, West Coast Rail Yard. A forklift lifts a mangled wing, once cutting-edge alloy, now scrap, onto a flatbed. Workers secure torn fuselage segments with chains. No ceremony, no documentation beyond disposal orders stamped with impersonal codes. This is how secret dreams die in the military-industrial world. In silence, in sunlight, with nobody watching except the men clearing the debris. Captain Halverson stands a few yards away, hands in his pockets, cap pulled low. He isn't officially supposed to be here, but Donnelly arranged it. A final look before everything disappears. The crane groans as it hoists the central fuselage, the part where the experimental weapons cradle had once lived. The mount points are visible, shattered, bent outward, the metal torn in thin white layers. Stress failure, plain as day. Walter Keene, the Douglas engineer who argued most fiercely for reinforcement, joins him. You see that, Keene says quietly. That fracture pattern. That's from vibration harmonics. We warned them about the coupling effect between the cradle and the fuselage ribs. Halverson shrugs. You warned them. I just flew it. But they both know flying it meant believing in it. Donnelly appears beside them, arms crossed. They could have fixed her. Add 5% weight, maybe 7, but no. Someone upstairs decided Vietnam would be some slow, swampy guerrilla mess. No need for fast attack, Keene sighs. They think they'll control the tempo of the war. They won't. A forklift driver signals the three of them to clear the area. The last major piece is being lifted. The cockpit section, the nose crushed, canopy frame folded like paper. Inside, some of Halverson's flight instruments are still bolted to the wall, frozen at the exact moment the aircraft died. The section swings upward, dangling over the flatbed. Sunlight glints on the cracked altimeter. For a moment, Halverson feels the pressure suit clamp again across his chest, hears the screaming metal, sees the sky tilt. The driver lowers the wreck onto the truck. Chains lock it in place. A foreman signs the disposal manifest. The paperwork says this is just prototype debris. No designation, no history. As if erasing the name will erase the failure. Donnelly mutters, "You know what kills me, Red? In 10 years, maybe less, some new fancy team is going to rediscover all the ideas this bird had. Composite ribs, internal stabilization cradle, high-speed microstrike missions. They'll call it innovative. They'll call it the future." Keene smirks bitterly. "And nobody will remember we already built a version of it." Halverson watches the workers throw a tarp over the pile, but the wind rips it loose for a moment, exposing the shattered silver ribs beneath. Those ribs were supposed to flex deliberately under stress. Instead, they flexed until they broke. And because of that, the aircraft never left California, never flew in Southeast Asia, never provided the pinpoint strikes commanders later begged for in the early chaotic years of the Vietnam War. Halverson remembers something Ames, the Pentagon officer, told him on the phone 2 days earlier. "Captain, we're shifting to programs that meet immediate combat expectations. The future will wait." But the future never waits. It arrives, whether anyone is ready or not. And when the U.S. finally entered Vietnam in force, young pilots found themselves flying close air support missions in aircraft designed for Korea, not for jungle canyons or hidden river valleys. Early precision missions were improvised, often dangerous. Losses mounted that a newer craft, perhaps something like this prototype, might have reduced. But those debates never make it past after-action reviews. The bomber's name, never publicly released, will not appear in any official Vietnam War histories. It becomes a ghost aircraft, real, flown, crashed, yet erased. Even inside Douglas, only a handful of engineers keep quiet notes about the program. Keene is one of them, Nishida another. They file away drawings, test logs, stress data, just in case the Air Force someday asks for a light strike aircraft again. Years from now, when discussions about the A-12 Avenger II emerge, another stealthy experimental strike craft with similar ambitions, some of today's forgotten engineering notes will quietly reappear in design rooms. No credit given, no traceable lineage. But the DNA will be there. Keene steps closer to Halverson. "You know, your flight might have saved lives." "How you figure?" Halverson asks. "If you hadn't taken her up, they'd have pushed it to full-scale production. That failure on a combat run would have killed crews, maybe whole missions. You exposed it early, before anyone bled for it." Halverson doesn't answer, because the thought is both comforting and devastating. The foreman waves. The truck carrying the prototype lurches into motion. The three men stand silently as it rolls out of the yard and disappears behind a chain-link gate. Not with a roar. Not with ceremony. Just gone. A shadow of a future Vietnam would never see. March 1965. Da Nang Air Base, South Vietnam. The air tastes of cordite and diesel as a pair of A-1H Sky Raiders thunder overhead, engines rumbling like old farm tractors forced into war. Below, mechanics scramble under the blistering sun, loading rockets, napalm canisters, and 20mm rounds. Dust coats everything. Captain Halverson, older now, posted as an Air Force liaison officer, watches the slow, lumbering aircraft claw into the sky. They bank east, heading toward steaming jungle where Marines have radioed for close air support against dug-in Viet Cong positions. The Sky Raiders are tough, reliable, beloved by their pilots. But they are slow. Halverson checks his watch. "I hope they get there in time," he mutters. Beside him, Major Tom Brackett adjusts his cap. "They usually do. Usually." As if to underline the point, a medevac chopper limps in low, taking ground fire even before it touches the runway. The pilot fights the controls as infantrymen drag a bleeding Marine from the cargo bay. Dust swarms around them. Brackett shakes his head. We need something that can move, something fast but accurate, something that can drop ordnance and be gone before Charlie even realizes what happened. Halverson doesn't respond. He just stares east, toward the jungle, toward the distant thunder of artillery, and he thinks of a prototype that once sliced cleanly through the California sky. A bomber no one here will ever know existed, a machine built exactly for days like this. Later that week, Halverson sits in a briefing tent as officers discuss air support failures from the previous night. A platoon pinned down, a delay in response time, a request for precision ordnance that couldn't be fulfilled. The operations officer slaps a map onto the table. Terrain's too tight for jets. Sky Raiders are the only birds that can fly this low slow, but even they're pushing it. We need something that can hit fast and leave faster. Another officer chimes in. There was that canceled Douglas thing from a few years ago, high-speed jungle strike concept. Whatever happened to that? Halverson keeps his eyes forward. It crashed during testing, someone answers. Structural failure. Program shelved. The topic moves on, but the words hang in Halverson's mind like smoke. Da Nang Flight Line. Near midnight, Halverson walks past a row of parked aircraft, Sky Raiders, F-100 Super Sabres, and a newly arrived flight of AC-47 gunships. Ground crews work under red lamps, preparing for night operations. He stops beside a maintenance shed, listening as rain begins to fall, a warm, heavy curtain drumming against the metal roof. Above him, the sky glows faintly with distant fire from a firefight in the hills. He tries to imagine the prototype here, screaming low over the treetops, dropping precision ordnance into hidden positions, climbing away fast enough to outrun anti-aircraft fire. But imagination is all he has. The aircraft was reduced to scrap before the first Marines ever set foot in Vietnam. He leans against the wall, eyes closed against the sound of the rain. Donnelly's old words echo in his memory. You did everything right, Red. It's the plane that was wrong. But Halverson knows the truth now. The plane wasn't wrong. The timing was. Too early for Pentagon visionaries, too unconventional for conservative procurement officers, too experimental for Cold War budgets shifting toward helicopters and slow gunships. And yet, exactly what Vietnam would soon beg for. 6 months later, Halverson transfers back to the United States. His war isn't over, but his role will change. Test pilot, program advisor, quiet voice in rooms where new aircraft concepts are being whispered. One afternoon, he steps into a classified design review meeting. Blueprints cover the table, strange lines, sharp angles, internal weapons bays, composite structural ribs. A new concept, nothing like the old prototype, yet undeniably bearing its invisible fingerprints. Halverson recognizes the ghost immediately. He sets his hand on the blueprint. You're building something that needs to be fast, he says softly, but strong enough to take a beating. The lead engineer glances up. Exactly. Jungle warfare taught us that. We lost too much time in the early years. Halverson nods. Maybe the future is finally caught up. Maybe the lessons buried in the California desert weren't lost after all, but nothing, no design, no success, will ever erase the truth that haunts him. The first aircraft that could have changed the opening years of the Vietnam War never made it past its maiden trials. It died before the war began. Its existence was erased, its value understood only in hindsight. A bomber born too early for the fight it was made for, a ghost of a future that arrived too late.